So before we start, just a little bit about ourselves. CertiKit, we're a leading creator of compliance toolkits, provide ISO services, and we're based in glorious Derbyshire in the UK. We've been around since 2010, and we've helped so far over 4,000 customers globally with their compliances to either ISO standards or to some data protection standards. We predominantly look at the ISOs 9, 14, 45, 22301 and 27001, and we also look at GDPR and Cyber Essentials. Our goal is to make compliance easy for everybody, which is why the toolkits are easy to use and implement, and we're always ready to help people on their journey. Bit about me, if you've not seen me before, I'm Ted. I'm one of the 2 compliance consultants for CertiKit. My colleague Jerry is riding shotgun for me in this webinar, so any questions you have, he'll be picking those up in the chat box. So I'm consultant, and I predominantly look at 9, 14, 45 and 22301. Look at updating the toolkits when new ideas come through or new changes in the toolkits come through, and also help new customers and future customers with their compliance needs. Like I said, I'm a technical author, so I assist with the development of the toolkits, and I'm a certified 9, 14, 45, 271 and 22301 lead auditor, and I've got about 20 years of experience across loads of different sectors. I'm also a certified IMS lead auditor. That's for 9, 14 and 45, a combination of those 3 as one management system. I'm also a lead implementer for the 9001 system. And I'm also a Black Belt Lean Six Sigma practitioner, which tends to help when we're looking at processes and mapping processes for our clients. So to get into the crux, what we're going to do today, we'll have a short introduction on what Clause 9 is all about. We'll look at the key concepts of Clause 9 and the background and why the stuff in there is in there. Then we'll break down Clause 9 and we'll look at monitoring and measuring, evaluation of compliance, internal audits, management review, and then summary. So Clause 9, what have we got inside of Clause 9? So it is quite a pivotal area of the standards. It's the one that actually drives you to look at what you've been doing, how you've been doing it, and to check that what you're doing is correct. There are 3 sub-clauses within this. So the sub-clauses are 9.1, which is monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. I'm going to look at each of these in a bit more depth as we go through the webinar. The second one is internal auditing, and the third one is management review. And like I said, we're going to look at each of these now in depth and see if we can take some takeaway points for you to use in the future. So some key concepts. It's important to note that some of the specific contents within Clause 9 will be directed towards this type of standard you're doing. So within 14,001 environmental and within 45,000 mental, there will be specific requirements within Clause 9 for you to look at. But generally, there are some common concepts across the whole of it. That makes implementation of an integrated management system, when you take more than one ISO management system and bring them together, a lot easier. And it's one of the few clauses where nearly everything matches across all the standards with very little changes. These concepts include the common ones: monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. So Clause 9 often emphasises the need for organisations to establish processes for the systematic monitoring, measuring, analysis, and then evaluating the performance of your management system. So this includes performance-related management systems and, of course, its objectives, your management objectives. Data and information. You're expected to collect relevant data and the information that will support your performance evaluation processes. So for 9001, it could be collecting your customer feedback forms, your customer complaints, because a customer complaint can drive improvement. Could be your supplier management and how you're assessing your suppliers, that sort of thing. We also look at performance indicators and metrics. ISO typically requires organizations to define KPIs, your key performance indicators, and metrics to assess the effectiveness and efficiency of your processes within your management system and the achievement of succeeding within your objectives for your management system. Internal audits, another common one. This is required by the standard, and it is mandatory for you to have an internal audit schedule. So you must conduct internal audits, and they're essential for actually gathering information about how well your management system is doing. So that's one of the reasons you do internal audits, is to make sure that you're compliant to the standard, compliant to the company's requirements, but also to assess how well the management system is actually achieving its goals. And then the management review. Again, this is a mandatory requirement across all the standards. This section usually includes a statement that says it requires top management. And when we work with clients, we all sit down with the MDs and CEOs to emphasize the fact that you may have a quality manager, you may have an infosec manager, you may have an environmental manager, but your management system, the buck stops with you, the MD or the CEO. And it's their responsibility to chair this meeting. This is them investing their time into their management system. So it's really important that the management review is undertaken by senior management. And it's there to look at the effectiveness of all of that data in one place. Obviously, before the data is presented to the management review, it's going to be processed into a format that's easily readable. And then from that, critical decisions about the management system can be made with relevant information provided to guide them on that. So management reviews is an important one within clause 9. So let's have a look at clause 9.1 first, and I've split this down into two areas: monitoring and measurement, and then analysis and evaluation. So this is generally the same across all the three standards. Apart from 9001, it squeezes in an extra requirement. So 3 subclauses. The first one is general, and that just generally gives you the background of why you're doing it, what you need to be doing, the sort of things that ISO is going to be expecting you to do, the type of information it's going to ask you to collect. The second one, 9.1.2, analysis and evaluation, but in 9001, 9.1.2 is actually customer satisfaction. Again, this is looking at how you're going to analyze it, what data you're going to use to evaluate your information. And on the customer side, it's looking at the feedback from your customers. That's not just feedback from your feedback forms that you may send out on a regular basis. It could be looking at customer complaints, looking if there's a trend in complaints that can help you improve a process or a service, and therefore you get that continual improvement. Complaints are a really good source of improvement. And then finally, analysis and evaluation. This is where they ask you, what method are you going to use to analyze your data? What baseline are you going to use to analyze your data from? How are you going to use that data? I worked with a company in Dubai for about a year implementing their 9001, and they had 3 years worth of customer data that they've never analyzed or used whatsoever until I actually pointed out, when we got to this clause and I pointed out, this is what we need to consider what you're going to do, they were gobsmacked. And when they actually started to analyze it, a lot of the errors that they've been finding themselves have been identified by clients. a lot earlier. So this drives you, this analysis and evaluation drives you to think about how you're going to analyze it, what methods you're going to do, the baseline you're going to work it from, and then what you're going to do with the information afterwards. So you're not wasting your time. So 9.1.1 in a bit more detail. It asks the organization to determine what needs to be monitored and measured. There are some set things within the standards. One of them is your objectives. You need to monitor and measure those to see if they're successful. Your internal audits is another measurement. Your risk assessments for 27,000, there's another measurement there. Your risks and opportunities across all of the standards, there's measurements that you could take there. Anything you feel, apart from the mandatory ones like objectives, internal audits, that would benefit knowing how or give you the benefit of knowing how your management system is working, you need to be able to identify it and decide how you're going to measure it and how you're going to evaluate it, which is what the next section is there. Methods for monitoring, measuring, analysis, and evaluating to ensure that the results are valid. That's the important thing. You're doing this for a reason. You've got to ensure that how you're doing it will get you the results in a way that can be validated against the outcomes. You also need to know when you're going to monitor it and when you're going to measure it. With objectives, when we do implementation, we advise our clients that, in the first year, you want to be looking at your objectives every couple of months just to see that you're achieving the outcome. Because if you do it once a year just before the management review meeting, or once every 6 months before the management review meeting, and then you look down and you find out you are way off, it's a bit of egg on the face. Where if you do it in the first couple of years until you get into the routine of looking at your objectives, you do it every couple of months, you may catch something earlier on that you could either change the resources or change the way you're doing it to achieve the goal. So when monitoring and when measuring is an important aspect of this whole process. And then when the results will be analysed and evaluated, are you going to analyse them midway through to see how it's going? Are you going to analyse them at the end of the objective to see if they've been successful? And then what are you going to do with that data? Is it going to be just put away in a shelf to say we've done it? It's a tick in the box for the ISO. If I was an auditor, I would be asking, right, that's fantastic data. What did you use it for? So you need to understand you're collecting the data for the purpose for continually improving the management system. So that's what it should be aiming at, is looking at improving the management system. 9.1.2 analysis and evaluation. So again, it says you evaluate the appropriate data and information coming from monitoring and measurements, and you use that to determine the frequency and methods for the evaluation of compliance. Another way of measuring compliance is conducting internal audits on a regular basis. So there's a measurement of looking at how your management system is faring by conducting regular internal audits, and we'll come to that when we look at 9.2. Evaluate the compliance and take action if needed. This is where you get the data, you're looking at it. If it's something glaringly wrong, you should do something about it. Not wait for a week or a month or something. You should action plan it, treat it like a non-conformity, action plan it, implement it, then review after it's been implemented, check that it's working, and then get that action signed off. Very much like non-conformities. We talk about that in the next webinar in October. You need to assign somebody who's going to be responsible for it. Because what I've seen in the past is that they say, oh, yeah, we collect all of that data. Who does that? Somebody in quality or somebody in operations. Has to have an owner. You may have several bits of data you want collecting. Give it to several people. Spread the love. Give it to somebody who's has an investment within that data to show how well they're doing. So they'll take some pride in getting that data out and showing how well they're doing. But it has to have somebody assigned who will evaluate, analyze and evaluate that data and have it validated that it is the true reflection of that data. And the important thing as an auditor, I would like to see this evidence of this. So you have to maintain the knowledge and understanding of compliance status with legal requirements. And the evidence in this case is you have a table and you have a review box beside it to say reviewed at this date. And that's the same with your internal audits, with your analysis and evaluation of all the other KPIs that you're looking at. As an auditor, I would need to see that you've actually done what you said you're doing. Where have you collected it? Let me see the methodology that you're using to collect it. Let me see the data. Let me see how you analyze it in their outputs. Let me see what you've done with that output. As an auditor, I'm looking across the journey from you collecting the data to actually using that data for good. And another one is effectiveness of actions to take and address risk and opportunities. This is clause 6.2, the standard, and it takes its feed from 4.2, the standard, where it asks you to review the requirements of the interested party and what would happen if you didn't fulfill those requirements or those needs, and what could happen if you did fulfill those requirements and needs, the risk for not doing it and the opportunity for doing it. This is an important part because this is a thing that gets reviewed at the management review meeting, your interested parties. And for 9001 particularly, the performance of external providers. In 9001, this is the only mandatory procedure. It's in clause 8.4. And you have to have a process for evaluating your suppliers. Now, these are suppliers that can affect your management system. So if you're a manufacturer, they're suppliers of raw materials or widgets that go into your products, etc. If you're an IT company, it may be a supplier of IT systems or equipment. There's a requirement that you must evaluate your suppliers in 9001. That's why it's here. And to do that, you have to have a process, an evaluation process, you have to have a scoring process, and you have to have a way of recording that information. And then finally, the need for improvement through the quality management system to the quality of your management system. So it's the same for 27,000, 22,301, 14 and 45,000. All of this leads to improvements in your management system. 9.2/3 depends on whether you're looking at 9001 or the rest of them. This is the variation for 9001. It asks you to assess analyze and evaluate the conformity of products and services. It asks you the degree of customer satisfaction. So it's actually directing you to get customer satisfaction information back and analyze it. Is asking you to perform an effectiveness of the quality management system. How is it doing? This comes from your internal audits, and also customer feedback is always a good indication of how well your management system is doing. If any planning has been implemented effectively. Clause 6.3 within 9001 is changes to the management system. This has to be taken into effect. So after a change has been taken place, you have to analyze that change and evaluate it as to, has it been successful? Was it worth it? Do we need to change it? This all comes under clause 9.1. And the effective actions taken to address risks and opportunities. This goes back to clause 6.2 and making sure that you've either succeeded in fulfilling the requirements of your interested parties or you've failed. So that's your risk and your opportunities. They're asking you that you need to check on that, evaluate how you're doing against that. And of course, performance against external suppliers, which is mandatory. And the need for improvement of the QMS, which goes into clause 10. Customer satisfaction. The organisation should monitor perceptions to the degree to which their needs and expectations are fulfilled. This really includes understanding the customer's needs. Now, 4.2 in all of the standards asks you to determine the needs and requirements of your interested parties. And your top external interested party should be your customer or your client. And you need to understand that. So this clause is emphasizing what is in 4.2 and 6.2 of the standard. And if you've been in seen any of our other webinars, and I've harped on about how clauses link together, this is one of those linkages where 4.2 drives 6.2, which drives here 9.12. Feedback collection. How you conduct your feedback. Do you send out a mail shot with a Word document? Do you send out a Google document? Do you send out a link for them to come across to your website to fill out a document? It's asking you to identify and determine how you're going to collect that feedback. And then how you're going to analyze it. Again, this in 9001, it goes into the nitty gritty because it's the quality management system. So it does delve down deeper than what we've seen before, where it says like, feedback analysis. This actually takes you a little bit deeper and says like, how are you going to analyze? What are your methodologies? Document your process for it. What are you going to do? Are you using qualitative or quantitative measuring? All of that goes into this feedback analysis to establish systematic methods for collecting that from customers, etc. Customers' perception monitoring. Regularly assess how customers perceive the organisation performance in meeting their needs and expectations. Now, that could be a question on your survey form. Have we fulfilled all of your wishes? Is there something we can do better? Type questions. But the standard 9001 is actually specific, saying that you need to determine and regularly assess how the customers perceive how you perform against meeting their requirements. Response to feedback. What are you going to do when you get the feedback? So process for implementing, for addressing customers' feedback. That includes handling complaints, resolving sorts of issues, implementing corrective actions where necessary. All of these, again, in 9001, you've got to identify and document. Continuous improvement, using that feedback as a basis for making improvements to your products, your processes for your products, your services, or your processes in general. And then finally, link to the overall performance. Recognize that customer satisfaction is a key indicator of the overall performance of your management system. For 9001, this is a key issue because if your customers aren't happy, then your 9001 isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that's 9.1. Seems to be a lot, but a lot of it is just common sense. It's probably stuff that you do every day, but not concentrating around a management system. Now look at the second subclause, which is 9.2, internal audits. It is mandatory to carry out internal audits in all of the standards, but it's also a critical component to assess how well you're doing. It allows you an independent assessment of your processes, your compliance to the clauses, your compliance to your own documentation and requirements, your compliance to legal and regulatory requirements. It's a checksum that you conduct. Now, an internal audit is a first-party audit. It's done by yourselves. And to do this effectively, you can't audit yourself, so you can't audit your own department. So you have to have a number of auditors so they can swap over departments to audit you against them, each other. Or you can do a second-party audit. You get somebody else in, like us, or another consultant who come in and conduct your internal audits for you. Therefore, they are totally independent and they've got no axe to grind with anybody, and therefore you will get a decent assessment of where you are. It comprises two subclauses, general, which we'll look at in a second, and then the internal audit program. And I said before, this is a mandatory requirement, and you have to have documented evidence that you're doing this. So the standard states the organisation should carry out internal audits at planned intervals to provide data on whether the management system, and then you get a long list, conforms to the organisation's requirements for its management system, and that includes the management's policies and the management's objectives. If you'd sat in with our webinar last week that our boss did on audits, it explains the different types of audits. You can do a clause-based audit, you can do a policy-based audit, you can have a mix-up of things, you can do a process audit. Doesn't matter, they're all internal audits. The requirements of this is documented, so you need to identify your audit schedule, and that's the only mandatory document within this clause, that you have an audit schedule, and within the audit schedule you have to put a date of the audit, the scope of that audit, who is responsible for that audit, and who the auditees are going to be. And as an auditor, that's one of the first things I look at when I come to clause 9 is your internal audit schedule. And if you've already conducted some, I would be expecting to see an audit report, because you've got to produce an audit report so people know when they've been audited what was right and what was wrong. And any non-conformities, I would expect to see any NC forms that have been generated and any corrective actions that follow up from that. We'll also see if the management system is effectively implemented and maintained. A lot of people think that once you've got certified, that's it. The system will just tick over by itself. You just dust it off once a year when your audit bodies come in to do the surveillance audit. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It's a bit like having a garden. You've got to keep tending it, otherwise it just goes to rot and ruin. So internal audits is a way of tending your garden management system, where your auditors are your gardeners and they're going around on your beds of the different clauses and making sure that each of the bed is fine. So by doing that, you can effectively assess whether it's been fully implemented properly and all of the processes that you've said need to be documented are being followed, and there's evidence that they're being followed, and that it's being maintained by looking at clause 9.1. Have you been gathering all your data that you need to assess and evaluate how your management system is doing? Have you done your non-conformities? Have you achieved your objectives? All of those are checking that you're actually maintaining your management system, and it's done through an internal audit. Clause 9.2.2 is exactly the same across all the standards. And it requires that the organisation shall plan, establish and maintain an audit programme. It's the mandatory document that you have to have. And within that document, define the audit criteria and scope for each audit. Select an auditor and conduct the audits to ensure objectivity and impartiality of the audit process. This is why you need more than one auditor if you're doing it yourself. If I'm in HR and I'm auditing myself and I've just come across a form that I didn't sign, where an auditor would turn around and make that as an observation, or maybe an NC, I would just sign it and put it to one side. We're human, we can't help it. We've seen a mistake, we want to correct it. That doesn't help, because you, as an auditor, as a person, I might have done that several times. I just picked that document. An auditor would look at that document and say, oh, you haven't signed that. Can we have a look at some other documents? Just to see if it's just been repeated and it's something I haven't signed. And it could be an observation that we discuss it and say, do you really need to sign that document? Because if you do, you have to sign it. But if you don't, take that signature box off so you don't get caught next time. So you have to have two auditors when you're doing it, so you can't audit yourself. Ensure that the results of the audit are reported to the relevant management. So you produce a report from your audit findings. Your audit findings are agreed at the end meeting during an audit. So if there's any NCs or observations found during that audit, you agree with the auditee, right, I found 2 NCs, 1 minor, 1 major, this is what it is. We've agreed that this is what you're going to do. Are you happy with that? They're happy. that goes in your report. It goes to the auditee and to their manager, because the auditee may not be the manager of the department. And if it's the manager of the department, it goes to the auditee and then the director of that department or the CEO, but it goes up to the right level. It also checks that appropriate correction and corrective actions are agreed with and done without delay. If I pick up a non-conformity and I've agreed with the auditee that he's going to get it done in 2 weeks, I will mark that down within my report that this action is to be closed off in 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks' time, I would then contact the auditee and say, that NC, have you closed it off? And if he or she says, yeah, I say, great, I'll just come across and just see how it's going. I will then verify that it's been done, and then I will close it off. The auditee can't close it off because he's human, well, most of the time. The auditor, that's a requisition on the auditor to go back and see if he's fulfilled that NC and the corrective action. But they've got to be done without due delay. It's not like, yeah, I'm going to get around. We've booked that in 2 years' time. No, that's not good enough. It's got to be an agreed timeline, sensible timeline that's going to be done with. And then retain documented information as evidence that the actual implementation of the audit program and the audit results. So that's your schedule, your audit report, and your NC forms that are generated from an audit if there's any NCs, NC being non-conformities that's been generated. It's a little sub-clause that has an awful lot of clout, and it's something that has to be taken seriously. It's really important. 9.3, management review. This is the last sub-clause within clause 9. And this is where the head honcho, the MD, the CEO, will have to sit down and chair this meeting. So the review is a systematic process wherein top management, CEO, MD, or his deputy, if he's on holiday or playing golf, has to be a C-level person. It's got to be a director, somebody senior enough who can actually take responsibility and make decisions within the management review. And it's their chance to assess the entire management system. They don't get to do it often. Normally for a new management system, we recommend doing it twice a year, every 6 months. And then after your first recertification, 3 years down the road, if you're happy with it, make it once a year. But in the first couple of years, if you do it twice a year, you're going to get a good feedback to see how you're doing. Now, you may need to make some changes, add some new resources, etc. It's no good doing that the week before a surveillance audit or recertification. So if you did 6 months before that and then 6 months after that, before you're up to date and you've already got things in place. So as I say, it's essential for maintaining alignment between the organization's policies, its objectives, and the strategic direction. Most management systems need to be aligned to the strategic direction of the company where possible. So this is common again across all of the standards. However, some of the inputs and some of the outputs will depend on the standards itself. Obviously, for 14001, one of the inputs would be impacts, and one of the outputs would be the aspects from those impacts and the changes to the treatments of those impacts. And the same for 45,000 would be hazards. All the hazards would that are still on the list or haven't been treated or have been treated, but there's residual hazard afterwards, would be discussed. So that would be separate from a normal 9001, 27001, 22301 type management review. There's 3 subclauses: 9.3.1 general, 9.3.2 management review inputs, and 9.3.3 management review outputs. So in general, it's looking that, and it, like I said before, it does vary slightly between management systems, but the actual statement at the beginning is pretty much the same, apart from 9001, which is the little bit that's in italics at the end of this, where it says, and aligned with strategic direction of the organization. That's specific to 9001. It's not seen in any other standards. There are some common ones, which I'm going to go through at the moment. And like I said before, there are some specific ones. Now, the standard actually dictates the inputs for the management review. Now, as an organization, you can add to those inputs if you want to add things into the meeting, that's fine. But as an auditor, and I'm auditing your management review, if you haven't fulfilled the requirements as stated in your management system, then I will give you a non-conformity. So it's not just a case of coming up with your own ideas for a management review. There are specific inputs and expected outputs from your management review that an auditor will expect to see. So you have to be careful what you put in and what you forget to leave out. So the common ones, the status of actions from previous management reviews. This is always a cracker because I've done a review a couple of months ago for a company, and their management review, we looked at the last one, we looked at the one that's just been done, and I said, right, great, the first one, review any outstanding actions, etc. And it said it's closed. I said, brilliant. I said, let's have a look at the minutes for the meeting before this. I looked at that, there was 6, they were all open. So I said, well, can you show me evidence that these are closed? And 3 of them were still open. You've got to be careful what you put in. You've got to make sure the information is correct at the time. The people who compile this is normally the management system manager, the coordinator. Some heads of department will have a feed in. The internal auditors or the lead auditor will have a feed in. They're going to collate the data in a format that's going to make it nice and easy for the CEO or the MD to sit down for an hour to chair this meeting. He doesn't want people to start going through, oh, right, this is the last audit, this is what we did. He wants pertinent information. We did 6 audits, we've had 4 NCs, 3 NCs are closed and being closed off by the auditor. 1 is still open, and that is expected. The due date is next week. Happy as Larry. Doesn't need to know anything more than that, unless there's an audit that's been open for 6 months beyond that, and then he needs to get involved. Changes in internal and external issues that are relevant to the management system. This goes to clause 4.1, the very first subclause in the management system, where it says you have to determine the internal and external issues that can affect the management system. This is normally done through a PESL and a SWOT exercise. There may have been changes in the last 6 months, the last 12 months. New regulations have come in, a new way of doing processes that have come in that you haven't done, or that you've had an input to some you supplying to another company and they've had a change. There's an external issue there. They've changed their requirements. That's a change in your processes. Therefore, it could affect your management system. So you have to think about those as well. Extent to which objectives have been achieved. So go back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about doing your measurements at least every couple of months for the first couple of years to make sure you're on track. And what the CEO, the MD will expect and say, right, we've got 3 quality objectives. We are on track with objective 1 of reducing number of defects by 5% in process 1. We are currently at 3.5 with another 6 months to run, so we're quite confident. Objective 2 is on track, exactly where we expect to be. Objective 3, we're a little bit behind track and we're looking at remedial action, and we'll report on that at the next management meeting. Simple, doesn't have to look at lots of bits and pieces. It's a statement that can be read out by the quality manager, the health and safety manager, whoever it is that's going to read that. Information on the performance and effectiveness of the management system and any trends. Customer complaints is always a good one. So this goes back to 9.1, where you're collecting that information, you're analysing that data, you're evaluating it, and you're coming out with the information to say, right, these are upward trends, they're good. These are some downward trends. Your internal audits will provide you with the effectiveness. Is the management system effectively implemented? Is it being maintained? How many non-conformities have we got? You know, Non-conformities is a way of turning around and saying, well, this is not working properly. That's the one that those two are going to feed this subsection. Adequacy of resources. This is a great time if you're a quality manager, environmental manager, health and safety manager, business continuity manager, infosec manager, to turn around to the top man and say, okay, we need this for the management system. You've got him at the table now, or her at the table. This is turn around and say, right, the management system is fine. However, we'd like an investment in this area, and we've looked at that, and we've done a business plan, we've done a cost effectiveness. This is what we think we need it, and we need it because of. It's going to provide this. It's a solution to that. This is where it comes in the management system. Risks and opportunities. Again, within the management systems, this will be changed slightly because in general, it's looking at your risks and opportunities in clause 6.2, your interested parties, risks and opportunities. We haven't fulfilled our clients' expectations. You know, we've got X number of complaints because we've done this. Now we've rectified it and we haven't got any more complaints. It was a risk, we've mitigated it. However, the opportunity is because we've done that, this has now presented itself, blah, blah, blah. You go through the critical risks and the exploitable opportunities as generated from your 6.1 analysis of interested parties and the determination of their needs and requirements. On top of this, you'll have your unit, your management system specific ones, your infosec, risk assessment and treatments, your health and safety hazards, your environmental impacts and aspects, your business continuity, your BIA, your BCPs and DRPs. So they are a bit more specific to each of the clauses, but these are the core requirements of all of the clauses. So you have to have a minimum, you have to have these into your management system agenda. On the flip side, what do you expect to get out of your management review? Opportunities for improvement. As I've said a couple of times now, and I've said it in past webinars, customer complaints are an opportunity. Customer feedback is an opportunity. Internal audits are opportunities. Risk and opportunities in 6.1 with your interested parties, there are opportunities there. There are opportunities when you are doing awareness training with your staff. Get them to come up with ideas. There's always opportunities for improvement, and out of your management review will come opportunities for improvement. These must be documented. These must be given an owner, and the owner is responsible for working out how they're going to exploit that opportunity, how they're going to measure and prove that it's working, and what resources they're going to need and the time frame they're going to do it in. That is what comes out of the opportunity for improvement. Any need for changes to the management system? Production line has got a new production line, got a new machine. You need to change the processes. It's been identified. You're in the process of remapping that process and verifying and validating the process as it's being implemented. And that is what human needs to know. This came up in the management review inputs, changes to the management system. This is the output. The output is we are in the process of mapping that. We are documenting that. We will then verify and validate that against the actual process and then monitor it for 6 months to make sure it's working. Change to the management system might be a new regulatory thing that came up. Within 27,001, one of the inputs are legal requirements and legal and statutory requirements to be reviewed. Opportunity for improvement. We've seen this is coming up. Rishi Sunak said he's going to do this. We've seen there's a potential for an opportunity for improvement there. We can be ahead of the game. It's an opportunity for improvement. Identified resources for these things. Identified resources to get objectives closed off. All of that has been agreed. All of that is an output that needs to be documented from your from this side of the management review. Actions if needed. So actions require responsible people. So you need to allocate during the meeting. The CEO or the management manager or the head of department will turn around and say, yeah, we'll take an action on that. Ted's going to be responsible for it. Jerry's going to help him in measuring it, blah, 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 blah. Actions need to be documented with the owner and their responsibilities. And again, the time frame and what they're going to be doing. And the important thing, it has to be documented and it has to be retained, because that's another thing. As an auditor, yeah, you conducted your management review meeting, brilliant. I've seen your minutes, you've ticked off all your minutes, you've made notes on that. Can you show me the outputs? Can you show me where this decision has come as an output? I'm going to be following that through. And if it's a case for actions to be needed, I'm going to say, okay, you've identified Ted's doing that. Well, I'd like to have a word with Ted. Bring Ted in. Okay, Ted, you've been doing this, you've been that. Yeah, I've been doing that. Right, can you tell you how you did that? All right, I did that. Can you show me where you've documented that? Yeah, here it is. There's my action plan. There's my my spreadsheet for documenting it. Jerry fills that one in, and then we evaluate it afterwards, and we give that to the manager, who then validates our findings, and then we're ready to move that into the management review meeting next time. Excellent, big tick in the box. Documentation for internal audits, for evaluation, internal audits, and management review are required as evidence of the fact you're doing things. So, summary, clause 9. It drives you to manage and examine your management system. It drives you to analyze its efficiency and effectiveness. It drives you to identify its opportunities for improvement. And at the end of the day, it gives you the confidence that you're actually doing things right, or it gives you the knowledge that you need to change things to do things right. You need to remember that applying the principles of performance, the evaluation, the analysis within a management system can actually lead to some substantial improvements within the efficiency and effectiveness of your management system. Don't think it's a waste of time, because I've seen some major changes in clients who go down this road, invest time and resources into collecting that data, analyzing it, looking at how they can use it to the benefits. It's a really important part of the management system to keep it going. This is, to go back to the garden analogy, this is the manure that's going to keep the garden growing effectively. A little bit about what we can do to help you. For those of you who've got toolkits, you'll know that we've got a support package in place. For those of us who haven't, who may be interested in purchasing toolkits, with each toolkit comes a support package, and that includes ongoing support with unlimited email support. You'll get document updates as and when we update the documents, and we will review 3 of your completed documents for free without costing you anything and feed back to you. One of the things we can do is do a logo replacement. We can actually tailor your documents with your company logo and then populate throughout the document your company name. ISO consultancy, the toolkits are designed that you can get up and run with them by yourself, but sometimes some clients haven't got the resources to do that. They haven't got the knowledge that needs to populate some of the areas of the toolkit, and then they look for a bit of help, and we can do ad hoc consultancy for an hour, or we can help you with a full implementation and guide you through that implementation, or we can actually project manage an implementation. And then finally, internal auditing. We can do second party audits to fulfill internal audits for your internal audit schedule. We can also offer companies that are going for certification and they want to have the confidence that they're ready for it. We can do a pre-certification audit. And if you can pass our audit, you will definitely pass a certification audit.